So what's the story behind Coalition for Kids?
There's a lot of ways I could tell that story, but we'll go with this. When Coalition started, there was a community in Johnson City. It was an apartment complex, and the name of it's still here. The name of it's Tyler Apartments. Tyler Apartments was built right next to a church. The church was experiencing vandalism that was taking place by some of the residents at Tyler. Now, Tyler was known then, or Tyler is the oldest privately owned government subsidized housing in the state of Tennessee. Wow. What that tells you is if it's the oldest, more than likely it's probably going to be the worst kept up, and that's what it was. At the time, that's what it was. And so the folks who lived there, there were a lot of kids who didn't have anybody to care for them. So they were free to run around. Nobody was at home, and there wasn't a lot of anybody just making the kids behave. So anyway, painting started on the church. The church decided to hire an architect to design a wall, to build a wall. It's a funny story when it comes, but that part's not funny. But they decided to hire an architect to build a wall when a new pastor came to the church. Dear friend of mine, his name's Hagan McClellan. He was the original spiritual founder of the Coalition for Kids. So he came to the church and he said, I think a wall's not the way to go. And what he did say, he got his people together and they met for about 3 or 4 months, once a week. Now, they didn't have any money. They didn't have about 50 people probably in the church. They were all over 70 years. I mean, it was the epitome of a dying church when he came. And they came up, they prayed about it and prayed about it, came up with this 3 things that in a 25-year window they wanted to see happen, that it would take God to do. And one was build a playground in the apartment complex instead of a wall, so as to be a bridge, kind of thing to the community, which was the right idea. The second thing was to build a community center for the kids in the apartment complex. And the third thing was a facility where the community could come to get their needs prayed for, but get their food needs met and clothing and other such things. They built the playground, and when they did, they got a guy named Mitch Cox involved. Now, Mitch, we would call him our financial founder. We would call him the guy who really pushed the envelope. Folks around this community and region know him with real estate. He's one of the bigger real estate developers in this area. Mitch got involved in helping build the playground and said, I think these kids need more than a playground if we're going to make a difference in their lives. And so they got some people together. Really, there were 7 guys that were concerned about the area. And Mitch and a guy named Lawrence Porterfield bought a piece of property about 100 yards from Tyler Apartments and said, let's start a community center. And they spent, I think it was somewhere around $200,000. Just pulled out of their pocket, bought the property, did a bunch of renovations, got this facility going. And in the meantime, run into me. They were both customers of mine, Hagan and Mitch. So I knew them for a long time. I had gone in the ministry as a pastor in 94, and this was 98. So 4 years, I'd what's called bivocational pastor, so I was part-time, working a full-time job. And they ran into me at 2 different settings and both asked me if I'd come on board and start the Coalition for Kids. That was the name of it. And I thought, I've never worked with kids. I don't know anything about a nonprofit. I don't know what a 501c3 is. I don't know really anything about this. I said no twice, and the third time they asked, I said yes. I'm gonna try this thing, and that was 24 years ago. Wow. Yeah, I had at that point opened up 6 businesses. Each one, I stayed about 3 years, 2 to 3 years, and went and opened up a new business. And I thought I was just always going to start things and just move on, and started the Coalition with the one thing I didn't know anything about. I've been there 24 years, and the Coalition for Kids. That's how it was birthed, and it came about for one group of kids, specifically Tyler Apartments. But the purpose of it, as we'll talk today, is a whole lot bigger than just for one group of kids.
Right. Right. So what's your like day-to-day like now?
Well, I went from, we hired 5 people when I started. We had 25 kids. And I remember, let's see, we started 10 weeks from the end of the school year, and we were going to do it on volunteers. That was the worst decision I've made since I've been an executive director, because our kids are not kids that you can manage just by coming in their lives and going out. And that's what volunteers do. Right. We love volunteers. We'll talk about that too later. But at that time, not knowing what we were doing, we made the decision that for 10 weeks we were going to have kids in the building, try to help them with their homework, try to give them something to eat, that kind of thing, with volunteers. Worst decision ever. So the end of that 10 weeks come, and we realized we got to hire people. And so we hired folks to come in to be a summer program, 7:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening. That's what we were going to operate by. And the first day, there were 7 kids. Now, at this point, I've been raising money for about a year and a half, getting money to operate, to pay the 5 people, the electric, the building cost, facility cost, that kind of thing. And on the 4th day of that summer, because the first day we had 7 kids, I literally thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Here we have said this was a need, and there's nobody here. On the 4th day, Thursday, I looked out the window, and that morning at breakfast, there were 77 kids. Wow. We didn't have the people to handle 77 kids. And again, I said, what are we going to do? Except this time it was because of excess of these kids were here. So kids come, and the reason I tell that story in the name of what I do, every summer since then, we have never had a summer that didn't have a waiting list, except our numbers are at 300 now. Then it was 70. Today they're at 300 on a summer, and we have a waiting list. We can't take all the kids that usually want to come. My job changed from watching these kids and dealing with these kids and staff on a day-to-day basis in everything we do, to now we have this infrastructure of staff. We have people who've been with us 10, 15 years who literally do all the hands-on programming. People ask, what happens in the day-to-day. I know what happens, but not exactly, because they keep me out of the day-to-day, because that's not my forte. My forte is making sure I have good leaders in the right place to take care of the staff, to take care of the kids, to design the programming, manage the finances, all the different things that make an organization operate. And I've just got to make sure that we are going down a path that is appropriate, that a path that says, are we going down a path for growth? Are we going down a path for stability? Are we in order financially? Because if you grow too fast, you're going to mess up. If you don't have the funds to grow, but you try, you're going to mess up. If you keep the wrong staff in the right place too long, you're going to, so I'm managing all that kind of oversight where you're looking down and making sure we're going down the path in the right direction, which is impacting kids and being able to prove the impact we're making, which probably is the hardest thing in the nonprofit world, is proving the impact. Excuse me. So day to day, I'm looking for building new relationships to bring in funds. I am overseeing my lead staff and making sure they're communicating and talking and managing their staff better. And just overall management, that's what it comes down to.
Why do you think kids in the Tri-Cities need Coalition?
Well, I would say that Tri-Cities is probably the least place that kids need the Coalition in the nation. And I say that, unfortunately, the Coalition is still greatly needed, which I'll talk about, but nationally, it's worse everywhere. We live in the greatest place in the world, it seems like. All you got to do is talk to everybody who comes here, and they'll tell you. And then all you got to do is read the Wall Street Journal, Johnson City's #1 place to live in the nation. This is the best cost of living. This is the best place for conservative living. And so we know how bad drugs are here, but they're worse everywhere else. We know how bad single parent families are here, but they're worse everywhere else. So it's not. It's not anything in the Tri-Cities that makes the Coalition need. It is the world we live in today is more broke than it's ever been. I'm just going to say it that way. So, kids here in the Coalition, let me give you a couple examples of who we serve. 83% of my families earn less than $20,000 a year. Now, if you've got 3 or 4 people in your family, maybe more, $20,000, most people I know can't fathom what only $20,000. Now, if you're a college student going to school full-time, you're working a part-time job, you got $20,000 in a part-time job. But my families have that to manage their whole lifestyle. I always say that one break job can cause you to lose your home, because in a family like this, they get a break job, they can't make it to work, the job lets them go, they can't pay their rent, they're kicked out, and all of a sudden in a half a day, they got to pack everything up they own and move to some other place, if they can get some other place. So, the kids in our communities, and 41% of my families earn less than $10,000 a year. If you think 20 stuff, 41% of my kids earn less than $10,000 a year. So, the kids that we work with in the Tri-Cities, and we're going to talk about our growth later, but, currently we've been in Johnson City schools, and every school in Johnson City has a population of kids that need after-school care. So now let's shift just a moment to go away from the idea that the coalition service is for poor families. That's not who we're intended to serve, although that tends to be who we serve. There are schools in the area that probably the community did not think that school needed the coalition in it, because they're sitting in the middle of an extremely wealthy, affluent community. But when the coalition was offered in that school, it had 60 to 70 kids that needed after-school care. So what did they need? Well, there was nobody at home for those kids to go to. So it was not safe when an 8-year-old goes home and there's nobody at home. 2 parents are working, nobody's there to take care of the kids, the kid needs somewhere to go. Or there's kids there that aren't doing well in school, so educationally. So it's not that we only serve a low income. We serve kids who need help educationally. We serve kids who don't need to be at home alone. There's a lot of different reasons for why the Coalition for Kids is needed. It's also the reason that it's not just Johnson City. It's Washington County, it's Bristol, it's the whole region. Anywhere we go, there will be a population of kids that will fill a building up if we give our services, if we make our services available. It'll fill a building up for the number of kids that have a need. Just in the name of trying to get ahead, there's nobody at home. Nutritionally, they need support. Educationally, which again we'll talk, I guess, more about in a bit. But educationally, all kids need somebody to read with them, or somebody to do math with them.
So I guess along those same lines, what can the kids in your after-school program expect?
Oh, that's a good question. One of our board members who did a video for us, one of the things he said in the video is, he said, you don't find our kids with their heads down wishing they could go home when they come to Coalition. They're usually pretty motivated to come because we've got staff that care. In their lives, most of our kids have a few people who care the way you're supposed to, the way you were supposed to love, the way a mom and dad is supposed to love them. They usually have a few folks, but honestly, their lives are so broken where they don't have family or extended family or more groups that most of us were raised with. They don't have that in their world. So the Coalition offers them something that we often take for granted, and it's a level of stability and safety that when you get off our bus or when the school bell rings, if I hadn't been around for 28 years operating the Coalition, kids would be going home on a school bus with nobody in the building. Kids would be going home to somebody that may not be safe, and I can tell story after story of those. Kids will be going home to no food. Kids will be going home to nothing to eat for supper and nobody to help them with their homework. So the Coalition, that's what most people miss. The Coalition, when a kid gets off our bus, because we transport, we have buses, and we do our programming in schools, but we also do it here at our facility. We do it in churches. We've done it in centers, working with Johnson City, where the city has facilities. So we've done it in all different settings. But when a kid gets out of school, they can expect that when they come into our building, whether you're at Mountain View Elementary or here, the first thing you're going to get is to get to eat. And so we do snacks when you get out. After snacks, it doesn't matter where you go in our ownership of programming, the second thing you're going to do is homework. And so we are school after school. So for another hour and a half, you're going to do homework. And when you're done with homework, you're going to read. So you're going to, because, and I want to take a minute here, especially if folks who are watching have never heard this. In the state of Tennessee and 22 other states, they dictate how many prison beds they're going to build 10 years from today based on third grade reading scores. It's 22 states that determine prison beds 10 years from now because of third grade reading scores.
Wow.
So to explain, when I do, it's always common sense once you hear it. You learn to read through third grade. You read to learn after. You swap the words. So nobody teaches reading after third grade. So if you're not reading on scale by the end of third grade, studies show that you will at that point start going backwards very slowly. And by seventh grade, you're pretty ways behind because you haven't got your reading caught up because you can't do your homework. Because you can't read. So by ninth grade, you're determining whether you're going to go on to college or not, and you're probably not because you can't read like everybody else. So you've been messing up in school, your grades have been behind. So this is nationwide data, but the crazy thing is, a guy named Dr. Randy Hensley, who works at ETSU Rural Research Institute, did a study in our region of 8 counties, and here's what he determined. In 8 counties, a kid that does not read on scale by the end of third grade will, I always say that's what we do is life or death, and people don't get it until I say this, you will live 7 years less if you're not reading on scale at the end of third grade. And that's because the decisions you make will always be going the wrong way. You will make it, but you will 25 less times likely to go to college. So you're going to earn less money. You're going to have worse medical care because you're not going to have benefits from a company that hires a college graduate. So all those things work together. You're going to 25 less times likely to go to college, 23 times more likely to go to jail. That's where the prison beds come from. 22 times more likely to be addicted to drugs or alcohol. All those things happen because you can't read in the end of third grade. Now, here's the cool thing about what God did use in me. He said, I'm not going to use you to do brain surgery because you're not just not smart enough, but I can use you to teach third grade reading. So that's literally how we're making the difference. Now, it's more than that, but when you say, what does a kid expect? He expects to come in and it feels like home. When I grew up in Mountain City, and I got off the school bus as a kid every day at Granny and Papa's. And all I knew was I was going to go in, and I didn't think about feeling safe. And that's what I want our kids. When they come in, I want them to assume they're safe because they know they're safe because nothing ever happens here. We take care of them, as I did. And I'm going to get a snack when I was there, and then I'm going to do my homework. Then I got to eat supper, and then I got to go play. Now, that was my raising, and that's what these kids will get in a roundabout way, that exact same thing. They come in and get a snack, then we do homework and reading and or math. Then they're going to eat supper, and then they're going to have some free time. At which in the free time, we do 1,000 different things, everything from managing your anger to character class of some sort of training, spiritual faith training of some sort, classes to STEM labs. I got a robot that costs $8,000. I've got a flight simulator that costs $10,000 that we train. I got a recording studio that our kids get to do. That's our STEM lab stuff. And then on top of just having normal game stuff, we have opportunities for these kids that they just wouldn't get anywhere else. And so so when a kid comes, that's what they can expect. They're going to do those things in that order, no matter where they're at. And it's nothing but a fun time most of the time, but it is homework. And we do require attendance. You don't get to come here if you just want to. We're not a community center. There's not a drop off and pick up. There is you come with us after school or you don't get to come. There is a required attendance or you don't get to stay. We will have somebody else come because I don't think you can make a quality difference without quantity time.
Okay. All right. So I guess in a related question, what can you tell me about the tutors and the other individuals that work directly with the kids?
I would tell you they're leaders, they're warriors. I hear all the time, and I might be known to say it at times, that we have generations of people right now, a couple generations of the young people that everybody's busting on because of their work ethic or the lack thereof. They talk about they quit at the drop of a hat. They talk about, now, the folks that come to work for me, it's not them. Now, we've had them. We've just learned how to not hire them. And so I will tell you that when you come to work for the coalition, there is an expectation and a bar, and all of our staff excel in that setting. So I can tell you that folks who come to work for us come to work, and they don't just whimper out and whine, and they don't just do it for themselves. They come because they love our kids. They love having a mission and a purpose. We are faith-based. They come because they believe in that same mission and purpose and that faith-based idea. They want to serve. Many of them are going to be teachers, ETSU. They come because they want to get their resume built while they're in college. Want to be a teacher, they come here and learn how to teach, and we train them on how to teach while they go to school. And so those folks, those are our hands-on folks, and there's probably 50 part-time people currently, and they're the ones who are work hands-on with kids every day. And then we've got folks who supervise them, and they're just quality. They usually, our full-time folks usually stay here around 3 to 8 years. And then the next level is my infrastructure folks. That's finance and development and marketing and HR. Those folks, mostly all are here 10 years or more. We do not have a lot of staff turnover except for that college age group that are getting married, having kids, taking full-time jobs, graduating college, which is all great.
Yeah.
Good group of staff.
So I guess moving on to what you had mentioned earlier along the lines of growth. And now your website says that you serve all the elementary and middle schools in the Johnson City District and one in Bristol City Schools. I guess what are your plans for expansion?
Well, this year was our first year of a 4-year strategic plan of growth that will allow us to go into 19 more schools. This is a cool story. It's pretty crazy. I will tell you the coalition at the end of this strategic pull, if we pull this off, we may be the largest in the South. It's not common for a nonprofit to go this big, just because in big cities where there are many kids, usually it's many organizations. So you still don't get to go this big. And so we're uncommonly set in a way that we can get to 3 cities or maybe 6 if you talk about Elizabethton and Jonesboro and Greenville, and that we can get into a lot of small cities that don't have tons of services like we're offering. And so currently this year, we've expanded into 4 more schools. Washington County, I always like to say, 22 years it took me to get into 11 Johnson City schools. And in February and April, I was invited into 19 more. Yes, I never dreamed that this would happen, but it did. In February, Washington County School Director Jerry Boyd called us up and said, would you all bring your program into our county schools? And I said, how many would you like? And he said, all of them. I was like, okay, this is, how fast? He said, how fast can you do it? It's like, okay, all right, new plan, folks. And literally from February to today, we're now in 3 more Washington County schools, and we will go into 3 more the next 3 years. So that's a 4-year plan to be in all 11. 2 months after Jerry called, Bristol City Schools called and said, we were in one school, as you said, and asked if we would expand our program in Bristol City. And I was like, I don't know that we can do it in Washington County, and now you want me to do it in Bristol too. And I said, I think we'll have trouble with employees. I don't know. Everybody's talking about not being able to hire. And they said, well, we have all these part-time folks that work for us in the school system. I believe, this is what she said, I believe that you could find all your employees in the group of folks who work for us part-time, because I think many of them are going to a second job. What if instead of going somewhere else, they came to you for a second job? And I guess the bigger question is not that what if they came to us, what if we found them and got to them and got them invited and somehow drew them over because they fit in our culture and they came to work for us? So I said, all right, let's try this. So in the next this year inclusive, the next 4 years, we will add, this year we went from 250 kids, I should say, last year we went from 250 kids, this year we'll have 500 kids. And basically every year after this, we'll add 250 kids a year for the next 4 years, which is, which will put us somewhere over 1,500 kids a day. And in almost, I think it's around 30 schools in the region. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. What's going on, at least what's going on with us and what we're getting the opportunity to do. It's very exciting. And still, I'd say this to anybody who's listening, we are very competitive with our pay. We've had to be. Anybody who's looking for a part-time job and loves working with kids, we ought to give us a call and look us up and come in and talk about what kind of programming and what we have to offer. Because we are, that's the big deal, is finding employees to come to work with children and teach them how to read and realize that you are changing the world, because you are truly stopping a child who may not live 7 more years and giving them a life that is extended, on top of the fact that they may choose to go to college because you worked with them in the 1st and 2nd grade. And now they have a different trajectory than they would have if we hadn't have been here in their 1st and 2nd grade years of school.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. People don't know till we tell this story how big a deal it is working with kids we do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of growth.
I don't know if we're going to manage that or not, but I'll run it, I guess, into the ground if I don't figure out how to keep it on top. So you can blame me for the failure or celebrate when we win. It'll be a team win if we win, because it's going to be crazy. Yes, it is. So this year we're literally doubling in staff and doubling in kids, and next year again and again. So we'll see how that goes. It's not going to be simple.
Right.
But it's working so far. What is this? October, November? Yeah, we're on it. We're on a path, and it looks like a good one. So, still hiring though every day. Every day that somebody comes in, we are looking to hire good people and sharp people every day. I don't know that we'll ever stop saying that for the next 4 years.
All right. I guess pivoting over to, how other people in the community can help Coalition for Kids. First off, I wanted to ask...
Write a check. I'm sorry. Go ahead. That's a habit that comes out of my mouth. The reaction for me.
Right. But I did want to ask, what does it mean to sponsor a child?
One of the ways that we ask folks to support us is $600. And I'm going to tell the truth on camera. So this time, this Sponsor a Child program started 15 years ago, maybe more. But 15 years ago, my budget was probably, it's a little over $2 million now. It's probably 800,000, maybe 500,000 15 years ago. And calculate it out, it cost me $600 a year to keep a kid in our programming. Those dollars have changed since then, as all of everybody's economy has changed since then. But the number is feasible for someone who's not going to be a one-time giver. We love all the gifts, but there are groups of people, and often there's that person who writes once a year, maybe twice, $100 check and sends it in. But the next level is somebody who's committed to your organization, and they will write you a monthly check or a larger amount, over $500, makes you a strong giver to any nonprofit. Yeah. And so 15 years ago, we started that $600. Today, that $600 goes towards sponsoring a child in our program to go through our program for the year. So it helps us to keep that child in our program, and that's the cost that we put out there for folks to support us and to support our children with. One
last question is, what other ways can people support your mission here at Coalition for Kids, like financial or otherwise?
Before I yell write a check again, I can talk a little about volunteers. We love volunteers. I would honestly, from having gone around in the community of our region, I think we're probably one of the bigger volunteer bases of organizations. Now, probably not inclusive of maybe the hospital, I don't know, places like that. But in the nonprofit world like I work in, we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of volunteers a year. We love them. They come in groups. They do things, everything from a fall festival and bring a trunk or treat to sponsoring a Christmas party for a class of kids. And we have tons of classes of kids. I got a text last night at the house that said, a friend of mine has a bunch of new coats for kids, still got the tags on them. Can you all use them? Sure we can. We'll probably do Christmas for 300, and right now our number is 322 kids that we'll shop for and get them $125 in value at Walmart, where we'll purchase Christmas for that many kids who are not sponsored anywhere else. But when we talk about volunteers and what can people do, the number one way is they come and read with the kid. We've talked about reading, and the reading, we have evaluated our program. We have proof, we have data that shows 96% of my kids read on scale in the 3rd grade. And when people come and ask me how that happens, it's because we have people who are sitting face to face with a kid, reading with that kid in kindergarten or 1st grade or 2nd grade or 3rd grade. We do continue reading through 8th grade or whatever they need help with. But volunteers, that's how we accomplish those goals, is by having volunteers. Anybody can donate. And we, like I said, we have people who donate clothes, people who donate food, people who donate their time, people who donate their cash. It's a large undertaking. It takes a lot of people, especially as we grow. So we are grateful to you all and for Burk and the work they do to support us in the community. That's how we survive. And we are grateful for all that type of support that we can get.
All right. Well, I appreciate you sitting down with me, answering all these questions. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, go to our website. We'd love to interview people to bring them onto the team. If there's people who are looking to support us work-wise, want to work, volunteer, give. We work with folks in all sorts of ways, from doing outdoor projects and moving mulch to indoor painting to working hands-on. So anyways, if folks want it, they can come by, set a time to take a tour. I love showing off the facility. God's given this. We didn't mention that, but the literal place we're sitting in, Mitch Cox purchased for, I guess I could say it, $650,000 in 2015. We did $450,000 worth of renovations, so $1.1 million. And he handed me the keys and said, now go do the work that God's called you to do. And that's how we got in the facility. We didn't ask for it. We weren't trying to get it. We were just working in a normal day, and Mitch called me up and said, here's what I'm going to do, out of the blue. And so we're grateful to have the facilities, and we like to show them off. So if folks want to come out and check that out, they're more than invited.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys.